right, team. We are back in the Fireside PM podcast. I'm here with Tim DeCino, who I first met, must have been around 2000. So 25 years ago.
Wow.
Crazy. When I was a young, startup guy and needed some corporate legal services, and Tim was there, and we were both on a tropical island called Singapore. So what a crazy world, man. How are you?
It's amazing to think back on how long that's been and how in over my head I was stepping out of my little restructuring practice to work with you guys. But I was so impressed with you back then. I tried to do my best, and it was fun. It was fun, but been great. And it's just a delight to reconnect with you. Appreciate the chance to chat with you here.
Well, if you were in over your head, then that made two of us. But you learn from every experience, and I'm glad we've been able to do cool things since then. Like, give everyone like a little bit of a background on who you are and what you've done more broadly, and then we'll jump into the AI stuff.
Absolutely. No, thanks for that opportunity. I most of my career of some 35 years was dedicated to being a lawyer, a debt restructuring lawyer, representing institutional investors in connection with distressed sovereigns and corporates around the world. I was in Asia after the Asian currency crisis and living in Singapore. I stopped that in 2020 and moved over to a litigation funding outfit. I did that for 4 years as an investment manager, selecting cases and investing in them and helping guide strategy. And since then, so for about a year now, I've been doing what I'm calling my chapter 2, the phase of my career where I get to do whatever I want, and a nice little portfolio of volunteer efforts here and there. And the one thing I'm doing these days, it's not volunteer, is I'm on the advisory board of a startup that happens to be focused on AI-driven litigation outcome prediction, which is absolutely fascinating. And then my wife is a professor at Columbia and NYU, and occasionally she invites me in to say a few words in her class about acquisition finance, but to comment on the impact of AI in the practice of law. Not that I'm necessarily an expert, but in the household, she defers to me on that one, and it's been sort of fun to speak on that. So that's kind of me in a maybe too long of a nutshell.
I love it. What does your wife teach?
She teaches acquisition finance, which is what she practiced, sort of private credit for a long time. And so she's teaching that. And it's a really interesting, I hope we come on to this later on. It's a really interesting course. It's changing the way law school it works in her course. It's like very almost apprentice-like, very hands-on, very transactional, like soup to nuts, what a deal looks like, as opposed to doctrinal law, which is most of what law school is about these days.
I love it. Before we get into the AI stuff, you mentioned that you worked in a litigation finance outfit, and that's a little bit like venture capital, and to the extent that you're making bets on things that have uncertain outcomes with hopefully asymmetric returns, right?
Totally. And uncorrelated to the market, right? So litigation is pursuant to their own merits and emotions of the players. So absolutely, but very much like a venture, deal by deal. And the way we invest in the litigation finance space is what we call a non-recourse basis. So we'd put money to work, paying the fees and expenses of the litigants, of the plaintiff generally. And then we wouldn't obligate the plaintiff ever to pay us back, except if they won. We'd get a cut of the winnings. And if they lose, then they never have to pay a penny, and we're totally out our money. So very venture-y. I agree.
Yeah. And you get a nice little carry if there's a big outcome.
Totally. It was a fun business to be involved in. It was neat as an old dog lawyer to step over into the side of the client and learn what it's like on the inside of an alternative investment manager.
What was the hardest thing about that job?
Man, sourcing. There's so much out there by way of litigation that doesn't look investable. And there's a lot of optimism bias amongst the lawyers who bring you the cases. They're involved, so they think it's a winner. But trying to figure out which cases really are juicy, which ones are really going to go far and lead to large judgments and collectible judgments is a tricky task. And I would say if I looked at 100 possible investments, we we took 3 of them seriously, and we probably did 1 of them. So we spent a lot of time, separating the wheat from the chaff. That was very, very difficult.
What were the criteria that got the 3 to stand out over the other 97?
I guess it was a collection of things. It has to be strong in every dimension. It has to be a powerful claim. It has to be brought by somebody, I say powerful, like a winning claim, one that when we make an assessment of it as a lawyer, we think it's a winner, it's going to win. One that's brought by a plaintiff who is a practical, rational actor and is going to deal with settlement discussions in a rational way and not be doctrinal in terms of pursuit of a judgment that may or may not be there. It has to be collectible. So if you win a judgment against a defendant, that can be lovely, but you end up with just another piece of paper unless you can enforce that against the assets of the defendant sometimes. And if defendant is a sovereign country in emerging markets who doesn't want to pay, that can be tricky. So the claim has to have strength and predictability in all those dimensions in order to really be investable. And I say predictability, and we would build our models and we would run on percentages, knowing that we weren't going to be 100% right on everything all the time. But boy, there's a lot of stuff out there that falls down on one of those dimensions, and it oftentimes takes a little extra time to figure that out. So, and you might invest 3-4 weeks investigating a matter, only to learn that, oh, it doesn't look good on this dimension, so we better put it aside.
Now, in those cases, are the plaintiffs generally already looking for, planning to go after someone, or are there situations where you go to the prospective plaintiff and say, you have a case to be made for being reimbursed for these damages? Like, how does that work?
All of the above exists in the marketplace.
Yeah.
I was at a commercial funder that looked at large commercial claims, not really personal injury claims in the main. At the tail end of my work, we started to get more involved in the mass tort space, which is a lot of spinning up claims and clients. But mostly what I looked at was debt claims or expropriation claims against sovereigns or commercial contract breach claims. And there we were benefiting from our network of legal counsel or in-house counsel who either wanted to obtain financing or were receptive to the idea of financing. So typically for us, it was a claim that had already been brought or was on the verge of being brought, and we didn't gin it up. But there's a whole other sector in litigation funding, especially dedicated toward personal space or retail or consumer space, where there are people out there identifying causes of action, trying to persuade plaintiffs that they should bring claims. And some people find that distasteful. Other people find that to be enhancing in access to justice. But we did not happen to be in that side of things.
And when you work with a plaintiff, do you agree on your walkaway settlement beforehand?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that can be another piece that can where it can fall down, right? Sometimes the request from the funders for a portion that is so high that the plaintiff says, "Oh my goodness, that sounds crazy," But some plaintiffs have no choice and really or don't have the resources. Say it's a patent prosecution claim and it's a startup, they might need to agree to it. But it's definitely a negotiation up front. If it's not papered in clear way up front, most funders, these commercial funders, probably wouldn't get involved.
One last question on this. As someone who thought he was pre-law in undergrad before I changed course, this is super fascinating to me. The Dominion settlement where Fox News paid $800 million or something to them?
Yeah.
Was that funded entirely by Dominion, or do you think there was an investor in that?
I don't know in specific instances. Yeah. I think there's been some publicity around one of those claims.
Okay.
And it might have been Dominion. It might have been somebody else where there's been a revelation that there was funding behind it. There might have been funding behind all of them.
Right.
I wouldn't be shocked, but it's the kind of claim that funders would look at, happily, at least to see, if it's a strong case. And then when one of them settles for $600, then others who have those claims might say, well, maybe I should look at getting funding as well, even if my claim is somewhat different. But a lot of speculation around that. That could be a political issue. right? If you were the one who funded Dominion, where are you today with the administration? So, but that definitely a hot topic. Definitely a hot topic.
Yeah, I guess whatever firm represented Dominion may lose all of their clearance to work on federal cases.
Who knows where that's all going to go? I've sort of been hoping that we're seeing a slowdown in some of the craziness vis-a-vis law firms, but I don't know that that's the case. We're certainly seeing some stand up and some strike deals, and it's just not in the news today like it was 3, 4, 5 weeks ago. And
there's too much. There's I guess they call it flooding the zone, right? There's all kinds of stuff going on.
A lot of stuff going on to keep you distracted.
Let's talk about AI and the law. I think the company Harvey is like the darling of AI, legal AI, or however you want to call it. I myself have used ChatGPT I just upload NDAs and things. I'm like, hey, or I do some angel investing and I upload the deal terms and agreement. And I just ask hey, is there anything egregious in here? And I'm sure there's lawyers hearing this, just having heart attacks that this guy's relying on some, consumer chatbot. But I find that it's definitely fast and it seems to highlight things that are relevant. What's the lawyer's take on it? Are we all, drunk on AI, or do you think there's really something here?
There's probably both, or all the above and more, but there's definitely really something here. Harvey is a great and growing product. Some of the leading law firms in the world have taken it up, and it's strong in lots of aspects of sort of law firm management and even legal work, contract lifecycle management, and other sorts of things at the core of what lawyers do day to day. ChatGPT itself, or a version of it adapted for law firms, or some of the other LLMs are getting adapted or created or adjusted in-house, and they are producing incredibly useful stuff. I'm no longer in the law firm, so I'm no longer charging by the hour. So my fear factor might be different from the average law partner or law associate, but I think the machines are showing tremendous capability, tremendous speed, and producing product that's just going to cut down on the amount of time that lawyers need to invest in client projects in order to produce a useful product. And so I could imagine a lawyer at a desk somewhere saying, that doesn't sound good. A client would call up with a project, and I could guarantee myself 100 billable hours for my team on that. And now the client's calling up saying, I have a legal issue. I've run it through ChatGPT. I've got a memo from the large language model already. Reads pretty well to me. That person's an in-house lawyer. Sends it off to the law firm. Could you give this a tire kick? Kind of the way that you do with your NDA. And now that lawyer in the law firm is probably able to spend 5 to 10 hours on this project as opposed to the former 100 hours. And that sounds like a slowdown in revenue. And of course, what the lawyer needs to be thinking about is obtaining a lot more inquiries like that, right? Or him or herself becoming part of the law tech industry, so that he or she is helping to drive that enhanced efficiency for the in-house lawyer and profiting from that kettle of activity, not just from the phone call and then the billable hours in the library. So it's changing a lot. And I think it's scaring a lot of people. And I think it's still opening up lots of doors for other people who are more awake. But what I'd say while I'm finishing this little ramble is the number of people in the legal space who I talk to still today who have no clue about what's going on, haven't even started to use ChatGPT, don't really understand why they would, is a shocking large percentage of people in the legal side. I think that's going to shrink, but there are some people whose lives are going to be disrupted fairly quickly if they haven't already been.
Yeah, I would imagine any law firm that, if I'm working on a transaction at the moment that does require human legal support, it's complex enough and the error costs are high enough that I'm as much as I love ChatGPT, I need to just make sure this is done right. But if I were looking for a new law firm, if one said to me, hey, we bill this much per hour, but we will use AI as much as we can to give you more per hour than we've ever been able to before, I would find that very compelling, especially if they're like, and there's always a human in the loop. So you're going to have the best of both worlds.
I think that's a common refrain. And the savvy in-house lawyer or just business person, I think, is going to be picking that line more and more frequently. And the savvy law firm is going to be predicting that and offering that up front before even asked. There's just no doubt about it that the tool enhances efficiency and will create better outcomes for clients, which is what law firms should be all about. So I think it's spot on. I think the tool is an opportunity much more than it is a risk for people who are proactive about it.
Yeah, it sounds like there's also an accessibility win here, to the extent that there might have been people who needed legal advice and support, or companies who did, but didn't have a lot of budget, would have just DIY'd or gone with a really low end attorney. And now they might be able to get like really capable counsel for a modest budget. And still that lawyer will do fine, because they're going to work with more, they're going to have to work with more clients though, probably then.
Yeah. They're going to be billing less per project.
Yes.
Right. So you need deeper relationships with people. You need to understand their business better, so you're called by those clients more frequently. Frankly, that frequency will be enhanced by the extent to which you are efficient in these ways. Just for the reason you articulated. I mean, if you called me up and then the first project I billed you 30 hours when you thought I should have billed 2, you're probably not calling me back, because the guy down the street's charging you 2 hours having used the AI tool, and you're like, I like that guy. I've got another matter, so I know who I'm going to call. So that competitive dynamic is absolutely going to grow, and I think you're right. That's the right way to look at it.
So now you're advising an AI startup. It sounds like it's in a different space than Harvey. This one is predicting outcomes. How does it work?
It's a predicting litigation outcomes. Harvey is not really, as far as I understand it, I'm not a user or a customer, but I don't believe it's a predictive tool in that sense.
I don't think so either.
It's very helpful in a wide panoply of things inside law firms, but we think there's only a couple other shops on earth that are really focusing in serious way on predicting litigation outcomes. So actually taking a claim and a defense and crunching it through a large database. Our first module, it's a company called Canatera. Our first module is focused on New York law, personal injury law, and insurance coverage law. And we basically have access to the New York cases and all of them. And we can crunch through a fact pattern, compare it to the database, and the machine, through AI, machine learning, and conformal analysis, will crunch through and figure out what are the similar cases, how similar are they, why are they similar, what do we learn from those similar cases, what does that tell us about what the outcome is going to be of this case, and then lastly, how verifiable is all that, and what kind of bell curve, how narrow of a bell curve can we put that prediction in. And the neat thing about the tool, I guess I sound like I'm bragging a bit, but is that it doesn't just black box it and shoot out an outcome like you would demand of any particular. That's the company. There you go. Of any particular lawyer that you hire, it will spit out for you an explanation of its work. So it will say, here are the 30 cases that we think are the most similar. Here's the way that those cases came out. Here's the relevant pages in the text from those cases that we're citing to. Which makes the argument for us persuasive that the case you presented to us is going to go a similar way. And what I like about that all is it's as if you called up a senior partner at a powerful litigation firm and you said, I want you to write me a memo describing whether I've got a good case and whether I should bring it and why. You're just going to get it from our machine, and then you're going to show it to your senior law firm, who's going to give it a second look. So the tool is effectively a very powerful second opinion, doing all of the work that you would expect of a lawyer, because we know that we're not selling this thing to lawyers who are very cynical unless they can test it, right? Play with it, adjust it. What if the facts are a little different? What other cases would be relevant? That's how lawyers would drive and build credibility and trust in the machine. And so that we're all thinking forward on that. And it's been a ball. It's just as an old dog lawyer, I keep calling myself that, never had anything to do with startups before, but watching this organization put the tech team together and the CEO and the founders, fundraising and making the case and watching the thing be built and testing it and showing it to customers has been a fascinating run. And then in a company that I think is incredibly relevant for, where the legal industry is going right now.
Yeah. So is the use case that, let's say I work for Acme Corp and this other company is suing me, and then I can say, hey, Canaterra, I'm being accused of these things. Here's a bunch of information. Go look at whatever previous cases are similar and give me a sense of whether I'm going to be able to defeat this in court or not, and what's the probability. And then if Canaterra is like, yeah, they're probably going to win, then I might be more comfortable saying, okay, I need to write a check to settle this thing.
That's exactly how to think about it. If you're a litigant, and if you're a law firm, it's an enhancement to your brain. It just makes you better and faster at rendering useful predictions and more confident predictions, so you can advise that client in the exact same way that you just articulated it. So the buyers of this would either be litigants, law firms, litigation funders who are looking at cases and trying to figure out whether they're winners, insurance companies, who are backing some of these liabilities and may need to figure out whether to settle, and others. But those are sort of several target client bases for using that exact same use case. I mean, look, we have this crazy vision, Tom, and it's scary to people. So we don't lead with it, and then who knows whether you ever get there. But there may be a world in the distant future where litigation doesn't exist anymore, right? People, you and I have a dispute, and we submit our particulars to a machine, and the law has been revised to specify that whatever the machine says is the enforceable outcome. And we don't have to pay $1 million a month to law firms to do battle, right? And wait for 3 years for the outcome to happen. We'll get a result in a matter of minutes or hours or days. I mean, and then what do you do with the litigators and the judges, all of that scary stuff. And I don't know whether you ever get there or whether you get close to that with some human monitoring. But what Canaterra is doing right now is saying over the next window of time, there's value to be added in providing this credible second opinion to empower lawyers and make clients smarter and investors smarter. And it's just a lot of fun to think through those things.
How long do you think it'll be, or do you think this has already happened, where two entities are signing a legal agreement and it requires them both to agree to AI arbitration?
Somebody's selling that product. I'm forgetting the name of it. And I don't know whether there's been any uptake, but there is someone out there who's exactly in the arbitration space. Maybe you have them in mind, and that's why you asked the question.
No, I don't, but I think it's super cool.
Well, you've nailed it, because someone is selling that, and they're basically saying, sign on to our protocol. And, when you guys, if you ever have a dispute, and we hope you don't, you'll pay us an annual fee. But if you ever have a dispute, we'll pump it into our database and spit out an answer. You'll have pre-agreed to this. And in fact, I'm also talking on behalf of Canaterra with arbitrators or mediators, people who resolve disputes, not yet judges, but who say things to us like, we are also potential customers, because it'd be wonderful for us to be able to say as arbitrators to the two warring sides, you guys are way out of market. You're unrealistic here. Your claim isn't that good. Your defense isn't that good. Until you get realistic into the middle, the machine tells me it's not worth spending my time with you. But if you could get there, I can probably help you. And then I'll use the machine to help you. And so there's that aspect of it as well. It's a very, very prescient question.
Yeah, and I guess the beauty of it is you have all of these. Are all of these previous cases like in the public domain? Like you can, I guess, train on what the judges have said and why and what they found compelling and all that kind of thing.
Yep. I mean, not every state makes it similarly available. New York State's pretty good with its state court rulings and dockets, the arguments that are made, and sort of what the judges have said, and all their reasoning is set forth in the opinions. The federal courts are also public, but they're behind a paywall. called PACER, which is massively frustrating to people. Where there's probably people arguing, even as we speak, to break that paywall down, and other people that are trying to mine it occasionally on a sort of take a penny, leave a penny basis. But there's a lot of law out there that is available for free or for low cost that enables this. Some states are going to be more difficult. The cost will be too high, but as time goes on, this is all going to improve.
Oh my, I wonder, I'm guessing someone's probably got a model to predict what the Supreme Court would say on a given thing. That would be interesting.
There's a company called Kalshi, who I'm sure you've heard about, which is driving prediction markets for just about anything you can think of, whether it's weather related or their elections where they're a big bugaboo and whatnot. But they have one module is, what is the Supreme Court going to say on this or that? And that is, of course, just people placing bets, right? As opposed to doing AI-driven analysis. But their theory is that, if you have a large enough betting universe, the House is always going to point in the right direction.
Yeah, the wisdom of the crowd and all that kind of thing. Definitely fascinating. Let's talk about the next generation's lawyers, the folks that are, they were like me, entering undergrad, thinking I was pre-law, taking gov and legal studies, some history, econ, that kind of thing, philosophy. So what will their law school education look like, or what should it look like?
Yeah, it's, I was mentioning earlier, my wife is teaching her course, her transactional sort of apprenticeship almost kind of course at Columbia. And it's sort of an outlier. There are law schools that have focused on AI in a variety of ways. Some of them have courses dedicated to the evolution of the law surrounding AI, right? The regulation of AI and so forth. And even some have some courses focused on more litigation oriented, or even a couple transactional courses. But what I think needs to happen, and is happening way too slowly, is that law schools should recognize the pace of change that's afoot, and the number of law grads that are being pumped out of law schools, that are coming to law firms or companies or government bodies as ever unable to do anything, because all they've done has been trained in doctrinal law, so they can think very clearly and they're great at cocktail parties, but they don't have any idea how to do any legal work. And the first 18 months to 3 or 4 years of their practice is pure training. Here's how you do what we do. And I remember just always being, even when I was young and in the middle and older, being shocked at the degree of incapability amongst these folks. And as time went on, pre-LLM, clients became less and less patient with paying for the hourly rates of those incapable young associates who were not, that's not a criticism of them. That's just what came out of law school. And many of them grew to become quite capable, but clients were unwilling to pay for it. And then along comes the LLMs. And now again, clients can get 85% of what they want from an LLM, or 70% of what they want from an LLM. So they're even less willing to pay for the junior. So simply staying the same in law school and remaining focused on doctrinal, aspects of the law is going to be inadequate, and people are going to be disappointed. And law schools need to think about that. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I think some of the stuff that my wife does is very central. That's back up the apprenticeship into law school, so that people are doing in law school the kinds of things that they will be doing in the practice when they join the practice. And they're learning the hard things about that practice in law school, so that when they come out of law school, they've been through some of that and are able to form some judgments about what they're seeing very quickly, and therefore are able to hit the ground running and start to be functional and value adding alongside the AI machines like Harvey and other things that are going to be doing the work of first year and second year and third year associates more and more efficiently otherwise. So I think law schools are going to have to change materially. They're just as reluctant as lawyers to change, and it's been slow. But I think the market's going to go upside down on the early law grads, and there will be some forced change. And then there'll be some agents who are excited about changing things, and we will see that play out over the next several years.
Tim, you use the term doctrinal as an approach to legal education. What does that mean?
I mean, when I went to law school, we had these case books. They were this thick,
Uh-huh.
2,000 pages each. And you had to get through, 4 of those a semester. And, you had to read the cases that were assigned by the professor. And you went to class having read those cases and engaged in what's called the Socratic method, where the professor would stand in the front of the room and effectively ask the class to teach itself, what they had read. And this was done by questioning, calling people out, putting them on the spot. What do you make of this argument? How did it work? And people had to, on the spur of the moment, explain what they had learned. It's very academic. It's Socratic. It's very intriguing. It's very rigorous, difficult. It's fun. It does train your mind, and it enables you to be agile and a good thinker. And so you come out of law school and you're really good at that. If I were to go to a client and they were to have a bunch of Socratic questions for me about a case, I'd be really good, at engaging in banter with them and arguing both sides. But no client wants that, right? What a client wants is addressing their legal need. I have a contract that needs to be drafted, and it needs to be drafted tomorrow, and it's 200 pages. And here's the commercial dynamics that are prevalent. And so I can't have these terms that I want, but I'd like you to push for these terms. That lawyer who's just been through that Socratic method has no clue what any of that even means, much less how to do it. Or I have a dispute. I've been sued in court, and here's the theory of the case, and here's my settlement limits. Here's what my shareholders would expect for me to do here. Here's where I cannot go. Here's my legal budget. And I need to get this handled as quickly as possible. Can you give me some advice? They have no clue, what that is like to deal with a desperate client in the middle of no empathy, right? No ability to hold a hand or to be responsive and be caring for their clients. They could debate you to the ends of the earth. So, and that debate is really good because without that doctrinal training, you're not thinking like a lawyer, and you won't ever become the best that you can be. But it's just the baseline. On top of that, you have to build the skill set to do the trade, the practice of law. So that's I distinguish between the doctrine and the practice, in a way.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you're not saying we should throw that doctrinal kind of process out the door, but you're saying that's great. That's good foundational first principles thinking. And then on top of that, we need to enhance it and augment it with a little bit more on the ground stuff. Because when I first heard it, I was like, oh, well, I do think taking my class on Greek philosophy was useful, decades later. It doesn't come up in day-to-day conversation, but sort of understanding different kind of theories and models and frameworks and lenses, I think can be useful. And so it sounds like you're not against the kind of foundational classical educational elements, but it also sounds like, Northeastern's like the hot school now, Austin, and because of their co-op program. And I remember Waterloo up in Canada does a lot of that for their technical, like engineering majors and stuff like that. And they all, in addition to going to class, like 1 or 2 semesters, they're like embedded in an actual company. And I could see the argument for the combination of those two. Do you see some law schools doing more of that, where you get out of the Ivy covered buildings and get into the real world while you're in law school?
Yeah, and that's been around too. Internships and so forth are there, and that has been practically useful. So it's perhaps not as dire as I painted. Law school is a 3-year program, and the first year is almost exclusively doctrinal, and the second 2 years there's more flexibility. And you find over the years that people do step into internships and try to get some practical experience. It always shocked me, though, how unuseful some of it was when people joined coming out of law school, because you have to know the trade of the organization you're joining. And there's even like summer internships that people do in law firms, which end up being giant marketing things where you're marketing the summer intern to come join the law firm. And so that's a lot of entertainment and dinners and red wine. And they're not really learning a lot until they get there. But so there has been that mix. But I wanted to come back to your point about, do I support, doctrinal aspects of the law school? Absolutely. It's got to be a critical part of it. Probably the first year should remain primarily focused on that. But beyond that, we need to change the mix so it's much more richly in favor of of some more internship or practical courses like the ones I've been talking about. And then to go back even further, in the United States, happily, law school comes after you've gone to undergrad. Right. And you can do 4 years of anything you want. And because law school is like going back to kindergarten, you don't have to know anything. I studied German literature and then went to law school. You could study medicine, pre-med, whatever you want. But what I like about the undergrad system still is it does train a young mind to be agile and to wrestle with things that it has never seen before, and to do so effectively and persuasively. And I've always been a huge fan of the liberal arts education for training minds that way. I still am a huge fan of that. And I think one of the key skills that young lawyers, young professionals in any space need to bring to their professions is that nimbleness, that agility, that ability to wrestle with problems they've never seen before effectively. And I don't think you get that just by jumping into an internship and learning one particular trade. You get it by studying philosophy and German and art and math and science and training your mind. So I think the ability to grow judgment by doing hard things in a liberal arts education environment is critical still, in my mind, to the future of the professions, at least for the next 10, 20 years. But then you have to layer onto that in the law, I think, in order to compete with AI, some internship skills building aspects of law school as well. Otherwise, you'll come out for the first 4 years, you'll be unemployable.
So interesting, because I also see the inverse of that, where and I know you're not advocating for this, but I'll just make an extreme argument. If someone is so pre-professional in their undergraduate experience that they're all about, well, this is how you put a contract together. This is how you put a case together using AI. And they're not developing their critical thinking skills at the highest level that they can, that as soon as that technology changes, or when the technology is wrong, they're just going to accept, okay, yeah, that's what ChatGPT or Harvey spat out. I'm just going to take it. And, I go back and forth on this one because, I've got a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old, like, becoming young adults in today's world. And I already see them using ChatGPT. And one of my sons, who's very principled and does not believe in using ChatGPT, was bemoaning how the AP language class, English exam is, I don't know, this week or something. And it involves writing. And he was saying, well, a lot of kids are using ChatGPT for their essays. And I was like, oh, you guys aren't using Blue Books? And he's like, what's a Blue Book?
Nobody knows anymore, Tom. Come on.
Nobody knows what a Blue Book is. So I was like, oh, so you go there with your laptop and you're just typing out your essay? And he's like, yeah. And people have other tabs open,
Yeah, of course.
And so I'm thinking, like, he suggested that it's not a small minority of people that are doing that. And I'm wondering, like, okay, well, how are these kids learning how to write?
Yeah.
Or are they just going to take, like, the AI slop that comes out and tweak it a little bit?
I think it's, to be clear, I'm in full agreement with what you just said. I was trying to emphasize earlier the value of a liberal arts education and the judgment enhancing skills that come out of doing hard things that are new to you. So I'm a huge fan of that, including writing. I've always said to my associates, if you can't write it clearly, you don't own it. You don't understand it. It's one thing to articulate it at a cocktail party or a meeting, but it's easy to trail off in partial sentences and not to be diligent and rigorous. If you can write it out in a cogent way that's persuasive, then you own it. So asking ChatGPT to write it for you is not the same, right? A machine wrote it out and you don't necessarily now understand it. You can turn in a shiny piece of work, but you haven't demonstrated or really internalized the subject matter. So I agree. I think at least in the liberal arts stage, it's some majority or some big piece of it has be driven in a way where you're causing people to learn how to write. And maybe we don't go back to blue books. I was sitting in the shower before this session and thinking to myself, what we might need is the reverse of what I did in 1980 when I moved from the mechanical typewriter to the electronic word processor. And we might need to go back to a room that's kind of a measurement room, where in that room there's 100 disconnected offline machines. They have no access to Wi-Fi or the internet or anything else. And all you can do on it is sit and type your paper, or go back to the blue book or something. But, some way to, have people explain in a meeting, what they've written and talk about it cogently and be tested and grilled as if they were delivering, a PhD. We're going to need ways to have people still be able to internalize and write things out, I think, at some stage. And then we're going to also need to train them to interact with AI and large language models and to produce the product that thing can produce with adequate prompting and iterative prompting and judgment applied to which parts of it are good and which parts of it are garbage, and to use that. So all of these skills, I think, are going to be relevant. And the trick with education is to expand itself to train people in all of these dimensions.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, that the folks who are becoming AI dependent will probably find it difficult to articulate and defend their proposal in a group meeting. And they won't be as effective because of it. Whereas the folks who compose the arguments themselves, it's fine if you want to use AI to refine it or critique it, but I feel like the first 70% needs to be you. I think it's inverted now, where people, they kind of do the 30% human on at the end.
Yeah.
But one thing that I don't know if it worries me or excites me, probably a little both, is that right now in 2025, when I ask ChatGPT for an assessment of a situation, I'm usually able to see the holes in its thinking and say, like, okay, that's great, but you haven't considered these things, or, your points 4 and 7 are inconsistent. And then it's like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, here's what. But I wouldn't be surprised if 2 years from now, I'll ask it the same thing, and I'm going to be like, well, that's pretty good. Maybe I'll poke around the edges. And 10 years from now, I mean, our conversation assumes there's always needs to be a human in the loop to so-called curate, refine, whatever, the AI. But maybe there will be a point where we're just like monkeys and there's nothing we can do to make this better.
Living in a land of abundance. I mean, look, I always talk to associates and others about, that's maybe a scary world. And the machine might get so good that we're not really poking holes in it. And maybe we should, but maybe the same would be true if we didn't have AI, right? Maybe there's some people out there who are going to produce crap and we could not look at it. And maybe then they would produce something later that was really, really good. I think of this AI, at least for my foreseeable future, I'm older, so I have a shorter runway left, as just being another tool and another producer of content. And I have to bring a critical eye to all of it. And my critical eye might judge that it's very good and there's not much I need to do with it. But, maybe there'd be an AI in the future that's doing what I'm doing today, reviewing the output of the first AI, and it might be better than me. It might be worse than me. It's just like humanity. You get better sometimes, you get worse other times. So I don't know why it's necessarily worrisome that the better or worse is being sourced in a machine as opposed to a human, as long as the objective is being satisfied. That leads to the question, what are our objectives? And if we're talking about education, we're talking about teaching humans to be effective, right? So at that level, you need to, test those humans and see how they're doing. So, instinctively, I want to agree with your 70-30, but I think that's going to change over time. And then when the machine can produce 100% work product in 10 seconds, then why are we training a kid to do that? We need to train the kid to do something else that's valuable for him or herself or for the economy. And it might not be producing that content. For a while, it might be exercising the judgment to discern whether it's the right content, which means they had to learn on some hard work and cut their teeth. But that might change in 5 or 10 years. So that's why I liked about that piece that you did, I don't know, 6 weeks or so ago, talking about the core skill for education is teaching yourself how to teach yourself, teaching yourself how to be nimble and flexible, and learn what you need to learn to be effective in the moment as the ground is shaking underneath your feet. And I always thought that's where liberal arts education is the strongest, right? So it brings me right back to where I've always been. Go study liberal arts and make yourself do a bunch of the hard work yourself, right? Don't rely on the AI to do that 70%, because that skill, at least for the foreseeable future, is critically important. That's what sparked me to contact you. I was so impressed by your writing of that piece back in April.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I wasn't sure if it would resonate, and I appreciate you kind of noticing it. So, and good. Yeah, one of the things that so this was on the Fireside PM Substack, and I talk about breadth and depth and the skill of rapidly acquiring new expertise, of being curious and adaptable, and the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Because there was a time 2 years ago where I do volunteer work at a local community college, and I'm an advisor with the business department there. And they're saying, hey, Tom, it seems like the future is, and well, maybe a few years ago, it was like machine learning. And then it was like, a year later, it's like prompt engineering. And now it's like orchestration of agents. And it's like, yes, but whatever the thing is, it's not going to be the thing 2 years from now.
Exactly right.
And so you're going to have to learn how to relearn and acquire knowledge quickly and be comfortable with that. The same way when many of us at these small liberal arts colleges, you'd have to go from philosophy class to econ to biology to, German or Mandarin, whatever. And you're just constantly stretching your brain. And I think that was because it helps you, become really adaptable and to go broad and deep.
And so brings us right back to all those decades ago when we did that. And I think that's going to continue to be super important. That's why I'm a fan of the U.S. system, having an undergrad period of time to do that. And I think, as you've alluded to, the trick will be disciplining people actually to do it. And I think we may need to find some tricks and tools to do that. But it's going to be hard.
Yeah, I like your notion of these like clean rooms, or where, where like, hey, look, if during your in the evening when you're preparing for class, if you want to use AI to explain to you this difficult concept, I mean, I've had long discussions with ChatGPT around a variety of topics. I'm just like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's like having like a tutor, on any topic I want,
That's great.
But then maybe when you go to class, it's no laptops, no mobile devices. It's 12, 20 people sitting around a wooden table with the professor, and where you really have to just go with your pen and notepad and make your argument, and your textbook if you want, and you make your arguments and debate it and really grok it internally, and then do the same thing for midterms and finals. That would be a good combination, because like no school is going to be able to keep it out, entirely. But I think during instruction and examination, I like the idea of not having it. It's sort of like, I think in the military, like, there are training exercises where you don't get to use GPS, and you just get like a compass, or you go look at the sun or something, and figure out how to get the base.
I might draw the line in a different spot, and I think it'll be up to academies to decide. For me, it's about measurement. I'm happy if a student uses any tool they want to digest information. Bring your laptops and your LLMs to class if it helps you understand what the professor is talking about. But when I want to tell how much you've learned, you're going to be looking at a blue book and a pen, or the offline safe room equivalent if you need to type because the kids can't write with a pen anymore. That's fine, but this laptop is not connected to the internet, or anything else, right? So you do your work on it, you leave it there. I come along and pull out the disk and verify. So for me, it's about measurement. But however you draw the line, is that concept of forcing kids to do hard things, a variety of hard things to build judgment so they can be better users of AI is a very critical thing. And we agree on that.
Well, we live in exciting times, as they say, Tim.
We sure do.
It has been a pleasure having you on the show, and we'll summarize this in a upcoming Substack article as well. So anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I just would thank you very much for the opportunity. A total pleasure talking with you. In some ways, you haven't changed. Your energy is amazing. I so respect what you've done over the years, and how you've grown and how our paths have overlapped. So I feel super fortunate to have had the chance to do this with you, and thank you very much.
Tim, next time you're in Palo Alto or I'm in New York, we absolutely need to break some bread and grab a meal together.
Can't wait, my friend.
Look forward to it. Take care, buddy.
Peace. Thank you.
Bye. All right. That was Tim DeCino. There should be a link to Tim's LinkedIn in the description. And then that startup he's advising, Canatera. Sounds pretty cool. I mean, it sounds like a must-have, right? Like if you're going to go into a negotiation, why wouldn't you get this predictive score and report for upcoming potential litigation? Let me give you 3 takeaways, and then we'll wrap up. I think takeaway 1 is it's good to hear that the Harvey hype is real and that it's really doing a great job from an attorney. I think the second thing is it's also cool to see that for legal tech, yes, Harvey is the big AI gorilla, but what Canatera is doing is they're kind of picking a different, it's more predictive AI than generative AIs from what I can tell. Maybe they use some generative for the reporting, but there are ways to go after a vertical that take advantage of different vectors. And so that's, always think about that if you're a founder. And I think the third thing, as a parent and just a lover of education and lifelong learning, I think if you're listening to this, you probably need to buckle up, because the world is going to be changing. To borrow a phrase from someone who I hear all the time, like no one's ever seen before. But in this time, it's like not exaggeration. And every industry and every job, especially if you work in knowledge work, will be kind of unrecognizable, I suspect. And so for us humans, our job is to always stay on the front edge of that curve, to be riding the wave and not getting drowned by it. You want to be surfing that wave. Let's be positive. So, and I think the way to do that is you got to get your hands dirty with the latest tools. I also think the value of first principles, critical thinking, the value of being able to synthesize information, to see patterns, to exercise great judgment, and to make those 5149 calls at the moment is something that AI's still got a lot of work to do. I also believe like at some point it'll be pretty good at that. And then maybe it's going to be orchestration of multiple agents, but then eventually there'll be orchestration agents that do a good job of that. What comes after that, I'm not sure, but that is why you've got to keep your brain fresh and healthy, and get ready to basically learn a new language every few years. And that's exciting if you're ready for it. And if you're not, hopefully society will figure out a soft landing for a lot of people who get displaced during these kind of revolutionary periods. And people call AI the fourth industrial revolution. I'm going to take a stab at coining a different phrase, which is AI is 400 industrial revolutions. Like, it's not like, oh, now we've got AI. We know how the playbook is written. We're good. It's like every year for the next 400 years, we might have to rewrite the playbook. And I don't know what the end game looks like. Hopefully it results in peace, sustainable planet, reduction in poverty, increase in wellness and happiness. That would be amazing. Maybe we can even get like a 4-day work week and universal basic income. But now we're bleeding into like a political discussion, which I will not do here. But if you like this conversation and you have other thoughts, put them in the comments below. But definitely give me a like and share if you want to see more of these discussions. And you can also subscribe to the Substack, which will have the written summary, because not everybody has an hour to listen to these things. And then if you like to listen on the drive, just find me wherever you listen to podcasts under Fireside PM. With that, I'm going to say, let's go back to work, team. Bye-bye.